Your neighbors are going to walk past your yard this season and stop cold. Not because you worked harder than anyone else on your street. Not because you hired a landscaping crew. Not because you spent $5,000 on fence panels and concrete posts. They are going to stop because you made one smart decision today, and by next summer, your backyard will be completely invisible to every single person who used to be able to see straight into it. I am talking about a living wall, a green, dense, towering natural barrier that local ordinances cannot touch, that grows on its own every single year, that looks 100 times better than any fence you could build, and that adds genuine, measurable value to your property at the same time. And I am going to give you 9 specific trees to do it with right now in this video. Stay with me until tree number 7, because that one is the tree most people have never heard of, and it solves a problem I hear about constantly from homeowners in the South who have tried everything else and watched it fail in the heat. Let me tell you something important before we get into the list. Most people who build a privacy fence do it out of frustration. A neighbor who will not stop staring, a road that got too busy, a yard that used to feel like a retreat and now feels like a fishbowl. So they call a contractor. They spend $3,000, $5,000, sometimes $8,000 on a wooden fence. And within 5 years, that fence is leaning, warping, rotting at the base of every post, and needs to be repainted or replaced entirely. And even when it is brand new, most of those fences top out at 6 feet because that is exactly where local ordinances draw the line. 6 feet is not nothing. But 6 feet is also not real privacy. Not the kind where you can sit in your own backyard on a Sunday afternoon and feel like the world outside does not exist. Here is what nobody at the lumberyard, the fence company, or the big box hardware store ever told you. Living trees are almost universally exempt from those same height restrictions. While your municipality will cap a constructed fence at 6 feet, they generally have no authority over how tall a naturally growing tree gets. That means a row of the right trees can legally reach 40, 50, 60 feet and block every sightline, every second floor window, every elevated deck across the property line without a single permit, without a single fine, and without anyone having any legal basis to tell you to cut it down. Now, I said almost universally because I want to be straight with you. Some HOAs and some very specific local ordinances do classify tightly planted rows of trees as a natural fence and attempt to regulate them accordingly. And trees planted directly on a shared property line can legally become what is called a boundary tree, which in many states gives your neighbor joint ownership and joint say over what happens to it. Do your homework, check your local rules, and keep your tree line a few feet inside your own property boundary. That is the legal due diligence. Now let us get to the trees. Number 1, Thuja Green Giant. If you only plant one tree from this entire video, plant this one. The Thuja Green Giant, a hybrid of Thuja standishi and Thuja plicata, is the most widely planted privacy tree in America, and the reason is simple. This tree grows 3 to 5 feet every single year. Let me put that in terms that mean something. You plant a 6-foot tree this spring. By the following spring, it can be 9 or 10 feet tall. By the 3rd year, you could be looking at a 12 to 15-foot wall of dense, rich green that fills every gap and blocks every sight line. And it does not stop there. The green giant matures at 40 to 60 feet, which means it eventually creates a screen that blocks not just your neighbor's yard, but their second-story windows and the elevated deck they built 3 years ago that looks directly into yours. It is naturally deer-resistant, which matters enormously for anyone gardening in suburban or rural areas where deer pressure is relentless. It has virtually no serious pest or disease problems. It tolerates drought well once established. And it grows in a naturally pyramidal shape that looks intentional and clean without you ever needing to pick up a pair of pruning shears. It performs in Zoosta hardiness zones 5 through 8, which covers an enormous portion of the country from the mid-Atlantic through the southeast and across the Midwest. Plant them 12 to 15 feet apart for a traditional screen, or as close as 8 feet apart if you want faster gap closure. The closer the spacing, the sooner you have a wall. Number 2, Emerald Green Arborvitae. Not everyone needs 60 feet of coverage, and not everyone has the yard for it. If you are working with a smaller property, a tight side yard, a narrow strip between your driveway and your neighbor's fence, or a front yard situation where proportion and scale matter, the Emerald Green Arborvitae is the tree built exactly for that scenario. Its cultivar name is Thuja occidentalis smaragd, which is Danish for emerald, and it earns that name completely. The foliage is a deep, jewel-toned green that holds its color through winter even in cold climates, which is something you notice immediately when everything else around it has gone gray and dormant. It grows 1 to 2 feet per year, which is slower than the green giant, but it tops out at only 10 to 15 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. That narrow, columnar profile is the entire point. It forms a tight, elegant shape naturally without constant trimming. You do not have to shear it into anything. Nature already did that work. Plant them 3 to 4 feet apart for a solid hedge, and within 3 to 4 years, you will have a clean, uniform wall of green that would cost serious money if you paid a landscape designer to achieve the same result. It performs in USDA zones 3 through 8, giving it one of the widest cold hardiness ranges on this entire list. If you are gardening in Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, or Michigan, this is a tree that will not flinch at your winters. Number 3, Leyland Cypress. For the homeowners dealing with large properties, coastal conditions, or situations where you genuinely need a heavy-duty, large-scale privacy screen, the Leyland Cypress is your tree. A hybrid of Cupressosiparis leylandi, it pushes 3 to 5 feet of new growth every single year, just like the Green Giant. But it gets bigger. At maturity, this tree can reach 60 to 70 feet tall and spread 15 to 25 feet wide. That is not a tree for a tight suburban lot. That is a tree you plant when you have room and you want to block out the world permanently. What makes the Leyland Cypress stand apart from everything else on this list is its tolerance for salt spray, which makes it the go-to choice for gardeners on the Atlantic and Gulf coasts where ocean air kills most other evergreens within a few seasons. It adapts to a wide range of soil conditions, including heavy clay and sandy coastal soils. It performs in zones 6 through 10. Give it space from structures, from power lines, from your foundation. This is not a tree you squeeze into a narrow side yard. But if you have a large lot, a rural property, or a coastal home where nothing else wants to grow, the Leyland Cypress will give you exactly what you need. I want to be honest with you about one thing. The Leyland Cypress can develop fungal issues like Ceridium canker in very hot, humid climates when trees are crowded or stressed. The solution is straightforward. Do not pack them too tightly. Do not overwater. Ensure good air circulation around each tree. Plant them with the respect their eventual size demands, and they will reward you for decades. Number 4, American Pillar Arborvitae. Here is one that most garden centers do not stock in large quantities, which is a genuine shame because it solves a specific problem I hear about constantly. You need privacy fast. You have a narrow property line. You cannot afford to give up 4 or 5 feet of usable yard width to a thick hedge. That is exactly the problem the American Pillar Arborvitae was developed to solve. This is a cultivar bred specifically for tight suburban spaces, and the numbers are genuinely impressive. It reaches 15 to 20 feet at maturity but stays only 3 to 5 feet wide. That columnar profile means you get serious height and serious coverage while surrendering almost no yard space at all. Do not let the narrow footprint make you assume the privacy is thin. The branching on this tree is dense and the foliage is packed tightly enough that when you plant them 4 to 5 feet apart, you get a solid visual barrier that closes quickly. It performs in USDA zones 4 through 8. If you cannot find it locally, check online nurseries that specialize in fast-growing privacy hedges, because this cultivar is absolutely worth the effort to source. For narrow lots, townhouse yards, side entries, or anywhere a standard width arborvitae would consume too much space, the American Pillar is the answer. Number 5, Nellie R. Stevens Holly. I want to talk about a tree that does double duty in a way that nothing else on this list can match. The Nellie R. Stevens Holly, technically X. ilex Nellie R. Stevens, is a fast-growing broadleaf evergreen that puts on 2 to 3 feet of new growth every year and matures 15 to 25 feet tall. The foliage is dense, deep green, and genuinely lustrous. In late fall and through winter, it produces bright red berries that turn a functional privacy screen into something visually beautiful in a season when most of your yard has gone quiet and dormant. That winter display is not a minor feature. It is the reason this tree earns a place in the front of a yard just as naturally as it earns a place along a back property line. But here is the double duty I want you to think about seriously. If you have had problems with people cutting through your yard, with dogs pushing through your fence line, or with deer walking in from a neighboring property, the Nellie R. Stevens Holly is a physical barrier that discourages all of it. The leaves are spiny, genuinely unpleasantly spiny. A row of these established along a property line creates something that deer actively avoid, that dogs do not push through, and that people have absolutely no interest in squeezing past. This is a living fence that bites back, and it does it while looking beautiful from your side of the yard. It performs in zones 6 through 9, tolerates both full sun and significant shade, and handles heat and drought well once established. Space them 5 to 6 feet apart for a dense hedge and let them grow. That is the entire point. Number 6, Spartan Juniper. Here is the one I want you to pay particular attention to, and I am going to tell you exactly why it earns its own entry on this list despite looking similar on paper to the American Pillar. The Spartan Juniper, Juniperus chinensis spartan, is a columnar evergreen that reaches 15 to 18 feet tall and stays only 4 to 5 feet wide. Those dimensions are comparable to the American Pillar, but the Spartan Juniper is built for a completely different set of conditions, and that distinction matters enormously depending on where you are growing. The Spartan Juniper is one of the most heat-tolerant and cold-tolerant columnar evergreens available to American gardeners. It performs in USDA zones 4 through 9, which is an extraordinarily wide range that covers everything from the northern plains to the desert southwest. It handles Arizona heat. It handles brutal Midwest winters. It establishes in the rocky, compacted, nutrient-poor subgrade soils that are common in suburban developments where the topsoil was scraped off during construction, and you are essentially planting and fill material. Most trees struggle in that environment. The Spartan Juniper does not particularly care. It establishes quickly, grows at a consistent rate, maintains its shape without intervention, and is naturally deer-resistant, which for gardeners in the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, and rural areas across the country is never a small consideration. Plant them 4 to 5 feet apart for a dense, narrow screen that builds meaningful height year after year while consuming minimal yard width. Number 7, wax myrtle. Now I want to talk about one of the most underused fast-growing screening plants in the American South, and that is the wax myrtle, botanically Morella cerifera. This is a broadleaf evergreen, not a needled conifer like most of the other trees on this list, and that distinction matters. The wax myrtle brings a completely different texture and character to a privacy planting. The leaves are glossy, lance-shaped, and aromatic. When a breeze moves through them, the entire hedge releases a clean, pleasant fragrance that fills the surrounding air in a way that no conifer on this list can replicate. But here is the number that will get your attention. The wax myrtle can push up to 5 feet of new growth in a single growing season under good conditions. That is faster than almost anything else on this list. It matures at 15 to 20 feet tall and tolerates aggressive pruning, which means if it starts getting wider or taller than you want, you can cut it back hard and it will push back vigorously without complaint or die back. It is also a native plant to the southeastern United States, which means it evolved for the heat, the humidity, the sandy coastal soils, and the wet conditions that kill most imported evergreens within a few seasons. It performs in zones 7 through 11, making it the essential choice for gardeners in Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Louisiana, and Texas. If you are in the Deep South and you are tired of watching plants cook out by July, the wax myrtle was built specifically for your yard. Plant them 5 to 6 feet apart for a fast-closing screen, and you can have complete visual privacy within 2 growing seasons. That is not marketing language. That is what this plant does. I want to stop here for a moment because I get a version of this question constantly, and I want to address it directly. People ask me where this information comes from. Who told you this? Let me ask you something honestly. Where else are you getting this advice? Are you getting it from a Garden Sense employee reading the back of a plant tag? Are you getting it from a website that exists to sell you something? Nobody at your local nursery ever sat you down and explained that you can legally grow a 50-foot privacy screen without filing a single permit. Nobody told you about the American pillar and why it matters for tight lots. Nobody explained the wax myrtle and why it outperforms every imported evergreen in the southern heat. That information is not profitable for anyone to give you freely. This channel exists to give it to you anyway. If you are getting value from this video, hit that subscribe button right now. It is free. It is here every single week. And every video on this channel is built around making your yard work for you instead of against you. Number 8. Cherry laurel. I want to address the homeowners dealing with a specific and genuinely frustrating situation: shade. Maybe you are bordered by a neighbor with large established trees that block most of the light along your fence line. Maybe your property line runs on the north side of a structure and gets very little direct sun. Maybe you have already tried planting Arborvitae in that spot and watched them slowly decline because they are not getting the light they need to. Stay dense and healthy. The cherry laurel, Prunus laurocerasus, was made for exactly that scenario. This is a fast-growing broadleaf evergreen that adds 2 to 3 feet per year and matures at 10 to 15 feet. Its leaves are large, glossy, and a deep, rich green that gives it the look of a lush, formal hedge rather than a row of conifers, which in certain landscape styles is actually a significant aesthetic advantage. In spring, it produces fragrant white flower spikes that are genuinely attractive, and it tolerates shade ranging from partial to quite heavy, which makes it one of the only fast-growing privacy options on this list that will actually perform when direct sunlight is limited. It grows in zones 6 through 9. One thing I want to tell you before you plant cherry laurel. Like most members of the Prunus family, the seeds and foliage contain compounds that are toxic if ingested by pets or livestock. That does not diminish its value as a privacy screen, but it is information you should have if you have animals that graze or dogs that tend to chew on plants. Keep that in mind and plant accordingly. Number 9, Carolina Sapphire Cypress. I saved this one for last because it is genuinely different from everything else on this list in a way that I think many of you are going to respond to immediately. The Carolina Sapphire Cypress, Cupress arizonica var glabra, is not green. It is blue, a rich, cool, silvery blue-gray that stands out in the landscape like nothing else, particularly when morning or late afternoon light hits it at an angle. In a row, these trees create a privacy screen that looks like it was deliberately designed rather than simply installed. The visual impact is something you have to see in person to fully appreciate. But the appearance is not even the most compelling thing about this tree. It grows 3 to 5 feet per year and matures at 20 to 30 feet, putting it in the upper tier of this list for eventual height. And it produces a strong, clean, cedar-like fragrance that permeates the surrounding air on warm days. That fragrance is not just pleasant. It functions as a natural deterrent for deer and many common garden pests, which means this tree is doing multiple jobs at the same time. Creating privacy, looking extraordinary, filling your yard with fragrance, and discouraging the animals and insects that would otherwise damage your garden beds nearby. It performs in USDA zones 7 through 9, making it best suited for the South, the Southwest, and the Pacific coastal regions. Once established, it is quite drought tolerant and requires very little supplemental watering. If you want a privacy screen that people stop and ask about, this is the one. Now, before I close out this list, I want to give you something you will not find on any plant tag or nursery brochure. The practical knowledge that determines whether your privacy screen succeeds or fails in the first 2 years. Because I have watched people plant the right trees in completely the wrong way and end up with slow, struggling, gapped-out hedges that took twice as long to fill in as they should have. Every single one of those failures came down to a handful of specific mistakes that are completely avoidable once you know about them. The first mistake, planting in a single straight row. Most people put their privacy trees in one line, evenly spaced, and then wonder why they still have visible gaps 3 years later. There is a technique that changes everything, and it is called the staggered double row. Instead of planting tree gap in one straight line, you plant 2 offset rows with the trees staggered so that each tree in the back row fills the visual gap between 2 trees in the front row. You are layering the canopies rather than relying on a single line to close itself. This fills in visual gaps dramatically faster and creates a much denser, more opaque screen in a shorter time. It requires more trees and slightly more width, but if maximum privacy as fast as possible is the goal, this is how the best privacy screens get built. And while I am on the subject of installation, I want to mention berming. If you want to jumpstart your privacy wall before your trees have had 3 or 4 seasons to gain significant height, consider planting them on a raised berm. A berm is a mounded ridge of soil 2 to 3 feet higher than the surrounding grade built along the property line before you plant. When your trees go in on top of that berm, you get 2 to 3 feet of instant height advantage from day one. You also get improved drainage for trees like Arborvitae that do not want to sit in wet feet. And on properties with compacted poor quality soil, planting on a berm of amended quality growing medium gives the roots an environment to establish quickly and aggressively. The combination of a staggered double row planted on a raised berm is, in my experience, the fastest path to a fully opaque living privacy screen available to the average homeowner. The second mistake, shallow, quick watering. There is a watering approach I teach every homeowner who plants a new privacy hedge, and it is called low and slow. Fast-growing evergreens do not just need water. They need deep water that reaches the full depth of the root ball and encourages roots to follow that, moisture down into the soil profile rather than staying shallow and surface dependent. A quick pass with a hose wets the top inch of soil and gives you the impression of having watered the tree. It does almost nothing for the root system. What you want to do is turn your hose down to a low trickle, set the end directly at the base of the tree, and walk away for 2 to 4 hours. Do this every single day for the first 10 days after planting. After that initial period, water deeply 2 to 3 times per week through the first full summer. After that first growing season, most of these trees, particularly the junipers, arborvitae, and Carolina sapphire, will need very little supplemental water at all. But getting them through that first summer with deep, consistent moisture is the single most important thing you can do to determine whether your trees establish aggressively or sit and struggle for 2 seasons while you wait. The third mistake, cutting into old wood. I hear from homeowners regularly who trimmed their arborvitae or juniper hedge and now have permanent brown patches that have not recovered in 2 or 3 years. Here is exactly what is happening. Arborvitae, junipers, and most conifers on this list will only generate new growth from the actively growing green portions of their branches. The brown, woody interior of the branch, what arborists call old wood, does not contain dormant buds capable of pushing new foliage. If you cut past the living green growth and expose that interior wood, that section of the plant will stay bare. It is not going to grow back. That gap is a permanent feature of your hedge unless you remove the tree entirely and replant. The rule is simple. Never cut past the green. Stay within the current season's growth when you prune. Light shaping is fine. Aggressive shearing into the interior is not. And for most of the trees on this list, you will rarely need to prune at all. The Green Giant, the Spartan Juniper, the Nellie R. Stevens Holly, these are naturally well-shaped plants that prefer to be left alone. Your pruning shears are not helping these trees unless you have a specific and deliberate reason to use them. The fourth mistake, volcano mulching. This is one of those things that looks like attentive, careful gardening from a distance, but is quietly damaging trees across the country. Volcano mulching is piling mulch up around the base of a tree in a cone shape, sometimes 6, 8, even 10 inches deep right against the trunk. People do it because it looks tidy and intentional. What it actually does is hold constant moisture against the bark of the tree, which causes crown rot, bark decay, fungal disease, and creates a perfect sheltered environment for boring insects to establish and attack the tree at the soil line. Do this instead. Apply a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch in a wide ring around each tree, extending out to the drip line if possible. Then pull that mulch back 3 to 4 inches away from the trunk so the root flare, the area where the trunk meets the soil, is completely exposed to open air. That mulch is doing real work. It conserves moisture, moderates soil temperature, and suppresses weeds. But it needs to stay off the trunk to do that job without causing damage. If you have existing trees with mulch piled against the bark, go pull it back today. It is one of the simplest corrections you can make and one of the most impactful for long-term tree health. The fifth mistake, compacting the soil after planting. This one feels like common sense, and that is exactly why so many people do it. You dig the hole, you set the tree, you fill the soil back in, and then you use your foot to firm the ground down and secure the plant in place. It feels like the right and thorough thing to do. It is not. When you stomp or compress the soil directly around a newly planted tree, you are crushing the fine feeder roots that the tree depends on to absorb water and nutrients during establishment. In serious cases, you can set a tree back by an entire season this way. The correct approach is to fill the planting hole about halfway with your soil, then instead of compacting it, fill the remaining space with water and let it drain slowly and naturally, pulling loose soil down into air pockets without any compression or root damage. Once the water has drained, top off with the remaining soil, water again gently, and apply your mulch. The tree is secured without root damage and will begin establishing immediately. One more thing I want to address, because I know someone watching this video right now is considering hybrid willows. I have seen those advertisements. 6 to 10 feet of growth in a single year. It sounds extraordinary and the growth rate is real. But nobody selling hybrid willows tells you what happens in year 3 through 10 when that root system, which is aggressively invasive and relentlessly seeks out water, finds your sewer line, infiltrates your septic system, wraps around your foundation drainage, or lifts your driveway from underneath. Those repair costs run into tens of thousands of dollars. And certain willow relatives are regulated as invasive species in multiple states. The 9 trees I gave you in this video will deliver legitimate, legal, beautiful, permanent privacy without that liability. If you are tempted by the hybrid willow purely because of the speed, plant a green giant or a wax myrtle instead. You will not regret it. Let me bring this together now because I want you to leave this video knowing exactly what to plant based on where you are. If you're in the north zones 3 through 5, your foundation plants are the emerald green arborvitae and the green giant. Both handle hard winters without difficulty. Tight lot, go emerald green. Space and maximum eventual height, go green giant. If you are in the mid-Atlantic or Midwest, zones 5 through 7, you have the widest selection on this list available to you. The green giant, the American pillar, the Spartan Juniper, the Nellie R. Stevens holly, and the cherry laurel all perform well in your zone range. Full sun and good drainage, green giant or Spartan Juniper. Shade along the fence line, cherry laurel. Need a deterrent as well as privacy, Nellie R. Stevens holly. If you are in the south or southeast, zones 7 through 10, you have access to options that nobody gardening farther north can use. The wax myrtle is your fastest native option, and it was built specifically for your heat and humidity. The Nellie R. Stevens holly thrives in your zone range. The Carolina sapphire is spectacular in zones 7 through 9. If you are in Florida or coastal Louisiana, lean heavily on the wax myrtle and give the Leyland Cypress serious consideration for any coastal exposure. If you are in the southwest, zones 8 through 10 with dry conditions, the Carolina sapphire cypress is the standout choice for your climate. Once established, it handles drought far better than most evergreens on this list and gives you that extraordinary blue color that nothing else here can match. And regardless of where you are growing, regardless of which tree you choose, remember these things. Stagger your rows instead of planting single file. Water deeply and slowly, especially through that critical first summer. Never cut into old wood. And keep your mulch away from the trunk. Those 4 practices will take a good planting and make it an exceptional one. I want to say something directly to the people who have been watching this channel for a while and to the people who just found it today. If you are in your 50s or 60s or beyond, and you have spent too many summers dealing with a yard that felt exposed, buying plants that the nursery told you would work, and watching them struggle, spending money on things that never delivered what was promised, this channel exists for you specifically. You have put in the time. You have earned the right to sit in your own backyard without fighting everything. Every video on this channel is built around that idea. The 9 trees I gave you today do not need to be babied once they are in the ground. The Green Giant does not ask for constant fertilizer. The Wax Myrtle does not need to be coddled through July. The Spartan Juniper will stand in your yard through whatever your climate delivers and come back looking exactly the same the following spring. These are plants that reward patience and punish overmanagement. Plant them correctly, water them through the first season, and they will build your privacy wall while you watch it happen year by year. That is what real gardening looks like for people who have figured out what actually matters. Here is what I want from you before you close this video. Go to the comments right now and tell me 2 things: your US state or your USDA hardiness zone, and which tree from this list you are putting in the ground this season. That comment takes 10 seconds. It tells me exactly where this community is growing and it shapes what I cover next. I read every single one and do one more thing. Think of one person in your life right now, one neighbor, one friend, one family member who has been dealing with a yard that feels too exposed, a neighbor situation that has been bothering them for years, a road that got too busy. Send them this video before you close it. The information in it could save them thousands of dollars in fence construction costs and give them something that grows taller and lasts longer than any fence they could build. It costs you nothing to share it. Subscribe if you have not already, and go get those trees in the ground.